Capital punishment is a legal penalty in Taiwan. The list of capital offenses, for which the death penalty can be imposed, includes murder, treason, drug trafficking, piracy, terrorism, and especially serious cases of robbery, rape, and kidnapping, as well as military offenses, such as desertion during wartime. In practice, however, all executions in Taiwan since the early 2000s have been for murder. Before 2000, Taiwan had a relatively high execution rate, when strict laws surrounding capital punishment were still in effect. However, controversial legal cases during the 1990s and the changing attitudes of officials towards abolition of the death penalty resulted in a significant drop in the number of executions, with only 3 in 2005 and none between 2006 and 2009. Executions resumed in 2010, and according to polls, more than 80% of Taiwanese people support the continued use of capital punishment. A 2024 poll found that 84% of Taiwanese oppose abolition of the death penalty. In 2006, Taiwan abolished the mandatory death penalty, but retained the death penalty for crimes such as murder, treason, drug trafficking, and terrorism. In total, 58 crimes carried the death penalty in Taiwan at the time of the recent judgment of the Constitutional Court. According to the verdict, Huang Lin-kai and the victim began dating in 2010. During the relationship, the victim deposited her part-time job earnings into a bank account, which she entrusted Huang to manage. In July 2013, the two agreed to break up, and Huang was called up for military service on September 17, 2013. The day after Huang enlisted, the victim checked her bank account and found that Huang had spent nearly all her NT $200,000 savings, leaving just over NT $2,000. She then demanded Huang repay the money. Dissatisfied with her for coming to his home to pursue repayments and disregarding their past relationship, Huang came up with a plan to kill her. On October 1, 2013, Huang sneaked into the victim's home and strangled her mother when she discovered his intrusion. When the victim returned from work, he bound her, sexually assaulted her, and strangled her to death. In both the first and second trials, Huang was sentenced to death for crimes including sexual assault, murder, homicide, theft, and trespassing. However, the Supreme Court ruled the second trial had not adequately considered whether Huang's actions constituted the most serious crimes as defined under international human rights covenants and remanded the case to the High Court for retrial. The Taiwan High Court in its retrial determined that Huang's crimes were clear, upholding the first trial's decision to sentence him to life imprisonment and permanent deprivation of civil rights for the murder of his ex-girlfriend's mother. For the murder of his ex-girlfriend following sexual assault, he was sentenced to death. The Supreme Court dismissed an appeal in July 2017. The court said Huang's crimes against the victim warranted the death penalty as they met the criteria of the most serious crimes under international human rights covenants. Huang Lin-kai was executed summarily and unlawfully. He and his legal team were given less than 4 hours' notice of his execution, which took place while an appeal was still pending. An indefensible disregard for the right to life and the due process of law enshrined in the Taiwanese Constitution. Minister of Justice Cheng Ming-chen signed the execution warrant earlier on the same day, the 16th of January. Mr. Huang's lawyers attempted to file an extraordinary appeal to halt the execution, raising grave concerns about the arbitrary and unlawful nature of the execution warrant. Shortly after, and without the opportunity for a family visit, Mr. Huang was executed. He was made to lie face down and shot through the back of the heart at the Taipei Detention Center. The Ministry of Justice did not give a statement at the time of Mr. Huang's execution. It had been nearly 5 years since Taiwan's last execution in April 2020. This shocking setback marks the first execution carried out under President Lai Ching-te's administration. Last year had seen positive steps towards restricting the use of capital punishment, with the Constitutional Court ruling in September 2024 that the use of the death penalty was inconsistent with due process rights under the Constitution and international law. While upholding Taiwan's use of capital punishment, the judgment limited the death penalty to a narrow category of very serious cases and introduced procedural safeguards, including a requirement for the unanimity of judges at trial and at appeal. The court invited the authorities to review the cases of all 37 people then under sentence of death and to file extraordinary appeals in cases where the safeguards and protections had not been provided. At the time of Mr. Huang's execution, efforts were still being made by his legal team and civil society to determine whether judges had reached unanimous decisions in his case at trial and on appeal. He did not have a pre-trial social investigation, indicating a failure to comply with the procedural standards set out by the court. On January 16, 2025, Taiwan's Minister of Justice announced that death row inmate Huang Lin-kai was put to death. Taiwan has faced renewed international scrutiny following its first execution in nearly 5 years, as human rights groups condemn the move as a significant setback. The execution took place late on January 16, with 32-year-old Huang Lin-kai, convicted of murdering his ex-girlfriend and her mother in 2017, being put to death by shooting. Despite Taiwan's evolution into one of Asia's most progressive democracies, public opinion remains divided on capital punishment. Surveys indicate that the majority of Taiwanese people still support the death penalty, a stark contrast to the island's political shift towards more liberal policies in recent years. Since a moratorium on capital punishment was lifted in 2010, Taiwan has carried out 36 executions, with the latest marking the first under President Lai Ching-te, who assumed office in May 2024. The execution has drawn sharp criticism from global rights groups. Amnesty International Taiwan condemned the move as a shocking and cruel development, with directory linked to accusing the government of undermining years of progress toward the abolition of the death penalty. The European Union also expressed its disapproval, urging Taiwan to maintain a de facto moratorium and work towards the complete abolition of capital punishment. This execution comes just months after Taiwan's Constitutional Court ruled in September that capital punishment should be limited to special and exceptional circumstances. However, the ruling did not mandate an immediate halt to executions, and opposition parties such as the Kuomintang have used the case to argue against the court's decision, calling for the execution of the 36 remaining death row inmates. Thank you for watching Death Row.